Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, everybody, once again, here we are, West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak. Toxie, you look like you're feeling better.
Well, that's not saying much, but yeah.
You sound like you've had a rough time of it.
Correct. Yep. Well, I've recovered from getting hit with a Mack truck, but
still not rain, so.
Yep. I'm okay.
It's so dry.
Okay.
It's so dry.
Yeah, my allergies are over there.
Yeah, that made it doubly worse.
Everybody
Yep.
is, I believe.
Yep. So, Lanny, you look good, but have you gotten all your planting done?
No, still planting.
Yeah.
But we're making good progress.
He's living in La La Land planting right now.
Yeah.
Dudley,
it's not going to happen this year, I'm afraid.
I'm worried
but I mean, we
too.
can't not put the seed in the ground. Can we not?
That's what I would say if I was in charge of selling seeds somewhere.
That's true. That's right, Mac. You got to plant.
And replant.
Yeah.
There you go.
Dudley, did you go to the Taylor Swift concert? Where
you
were
was
you
at some
recently?
show this weekend, weren't you?
No, I was at the Shin Gear Festival,
How was that?
film festival. It was awesome.
I heard it was.
It was like an inaugural year for it. The setting was incredible. It's at near the Memphis Botanic Garden. There's like savanna-looking oaks everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Just a really cool setting. They had those Brio fire pits for everybody. People were all sitting around that in the chairs watching the videos, and the films were actually like conservation based. It wasn't just like duck hunting films. One of them actually drew a couple of tears, and a couple of them drew some goosebumps, and
Wow.
one of them I stood up and yelled amen with a bunch of people. I mean, that's how good it was.
That's awesome.
Had you been imbibing at all?
I mean, not any more than anybody else.
I'd like to see them stand up and yell amen.
Filet. I mean, they had filet, smoked salmon for dinner. I mean, it was insanely good. I
good.
really enjoyed it.
First class event, sounds like.
Mac, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good, Bob. How about you?
Do we have any seed left?
A little bit of clover, but we've been pretty much wrapped up. I mean, I'm just dancing.
I'll take it.
We sure need some rain. And most of the Deep South needs it.
bad.
We've got two guests. We've got Dr. Marcus Lashley,
Hit the horns. There you go.
and we've got Dr. Will Gulsby. And I bet you guys are hearing people fuss about
Is everybody whining like we are?
It's depression is actually what it is. Clinical depression.
Yeah, they're doing that around here too. I mean, we've had, I think, 2 good rain events in Auburn since beginning of September. But luckily, one of those was within 2 days of us planting our food plots on our club. So we got lucky.
You did. Good for you.
Okay, I'm not talking to him anymore. During this podcast.
But their blanket answer, being PhDs that they are, is if you've done your job on all of your habitat, those food plots are gravy. Your deer have lots of food out there if you've been doing your burns.
I beg to differ.
And doing your disturbances and all that good stuff.
When you see 80-year-old trees with huge root systems dying from drought, the early successional habitat is in serious trouble. I mean, it's just like, honeysuckle, or it's just crinkled brown like you round up everything. It's terrible.
It is. Will, you're closer to us, and are you seeing these? Are you riding down the road and seeing big trees just look like they're dying?
No, it's not that bad here. We've been fortunate with getting a little bit wetter weather pattern than y'all have, but apparently it's getting more and more severe the further you go west. I was talking to a buddy in Louisiana a few days ago, and he's wondering if he's even going to duck hunt on his club this year because they don't have any water for ducks.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
we're
the
the same way.
Yeah.
Got some good crops.
Dudley, have you been to your
water.
place lately?
I have not.
Because the drought monitor said it's worse, like he said, like Jackson, north of Jackson, over in Louisiana, that it's even worse than here.
Oh yeah,
man.
it's rough. It's rough stuff.
What about you down to where you are, Marcus?
Yeah, it's not nearly as bad here, and I've been hearing the same trend you guys are talking about. In fact, one of the folks I work with quite a bit is over in West Mississippi and has been under a burn ban for a while, and it's tearing him up.
I bet.
Not being able to
Yeah.
get any burning done.
Yeah, we're in a burn ban.
I've got a buddy that's got a cabin on the Little Red River in the Ozarks, and they have quit letting water through the dam. That's how low it is, and you know, that's what keeps that cool water and that moving water for all of those trout. And you can literally walk across the Little Red in places right now. So
Wow.
lots of craziness going
Deer
on.
have destroyed everything. Never have had that happen. Y'all know where I live, and there's deer around there some, but they've never been on the patio eating the plants and the pots on the patio and stuff. You can tell they're really hurting.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Well, let's keep this thing moving. We always do blood on the biologic. Brought to you by LS Tractor. The new camo
It is here.
is here.
It looks awesome too.
Guys, have y'all heard about this at all? Y'all are probably down there in your own little world, but LS Tractors, who's one of our sponsors, is doing a bottomland 57 horsepower little tractor. It is the
It's a
neatest looking
great
thing.
size
It's a
food
hoss.
plotting
It's a
tractor.
hoss.
It is a stout, good looking tractor, and you know everything's better than bottomland.
So if
Yeah,
you
it
get a
is.
chance, you can go to
LSTractors.
lstractorsusa.com and you can check it out. So,
Yeah, it's a good one. And one little thing I've noticed about it is it's in a small package, so you could, you know, pull it behind your gas burner truck. It almost looks more like a tractor that the horsepower would be in the high 30s, but they've managed to fit 57 horses under the hood of that little tractor, and it's beefy.
Yeah, and the axles, the tires, everything's are real heavy and heavy duty. So it's gonna be a great food plotting tractor for sure.
yeah, so they're making 100 of them, guys. So it's a limited edition, and then hopefully there'll be another 100 after the around the first of the year. So y'all check that out. And who's seeing any kid? What's going on, Mac?
Yeah, so I've got a blood on the biologic. A guy that I've talked to some, Mr. John Ramsey, his son, John Woodside Ramsey, in Macon County, Alabama, killed a really good deer in some endurance radish.
Oh,
Look at that. Is that the picture of it?
That's it.
Got on bottomland. Look at there.
That's not far from Will either.
No, that's about 30, 40 minutes down the road.
Yeah, that's a great deer.
That's
So
a great picture.
congrats to
And
them.
since they bought that farm, they've been watching this deer. It was the first deer they had on camera on this place, and they could tell by the listeners can't see, but there's a cut in his right ear, and so they've been able to watch this deer, and it's his biggest bow deer to date.
Well, good for him. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's a heck of a deer.
Yeah, it is.
So Sim Copeland is over there in Georgia. You might know Caleb Copeland.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
He's
Oh,
got a
Caleb.
7-year-old son killed an 8-point buck. So,
Nice.
first deer. So he's all excited about it.
Caleb's an outstanding videographer.
He is.
Just
Yeah.
knows his stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
youth season opens here. What?
Pretty soon.
Not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Yeah.
Now, Will, I remember seeing you sent me a picture of maybe you and your family. Y'all killed some deer last year. It was kind
We
of
did.
toward the end of the season there. But are
Yeah.
your kids excited about going back out this year?
Oh, absolutely. We're in a new club. Got one a little bit closer to the house this year, so I'm hoping to get them out there a little bit more. And the old one was about an hour away, so an hour each way with two little ones is kind of tough.
Yeah, it is.
But my daughter is 8, and I'm thinking about trying to get her on her first deer this year. We'll see if she's ready or not. But my son's only 3. But I wanted to send you that picture last year because he was only 2 years old, sitting in the blind with me, and we killed that doe. So he was there for his first deer harvest period at 2 years old. I thought that was pretty cool.
That's really cool.
That's how you get them started.
That's how you raise them up right,
Yeah.
right there. That's right.
Absolutely.
Well, Marcus, you got what's going on with your family, real quick, and we'll get started on this.
Yeah, so I have 2 young girls. Both of them are not ready yet for pulling the trigger, but I have been working on some food plots in Alabama on our family land. I was going to tell you earlier, we did get some rain on those as well, and they're coming up and looking good. So my oldest, I'm planning to take here in just a couple of weeks to sit in a house, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to have that be her first harvest, or at least be present for the first harvest.
Yeah,
So-
keep us posted on that. Take some pictures.
100%.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, so look, guys, we're kind of referring to this time frame we're in. We love October, but I'm gonna call it Oaktober.
Oh,
October.
I hear you.
Yeah.
You've been holding that one.
They couldn't wait to drop that.
That one was pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah. So we love oak trees. We really do. And when you think about
You'd
it,
think we would.
well, yeah. But I'm looking at the two doctors on the television here. When you think about oak trees, is there anything else that gives more nourishment and sustenance to our wildlife than just in a big category than oak trees? Will, am I missing something?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to oversell the value of oaks to wildlife. And, it's just, you think about leaves changing colors and acorns dropping, and, that's my favorite time of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. When the turkeys are gobbling, it's hard to think that way. But I love this time of year too.
Fair.
And oaks have been characterized as a keystone species. So, an umbrella that broadly affects, a tremendous number of wildlife species. So no doubt, over a broad landscape globally, not just even in the eastern United States, pretty important group of plants for wildlife.
Your daughter's been begging you to hunt since her little brother shot the big 8 last year. You've ran a fire, dissed the fields, got stuck, got unstuck. Planted food plots, fertilized, and prayed for rain. You moved trees, limbed roads, even bought one of those fancy cell cameras.
So what's your excuse?
LS Tractor.
Moultrie has pioneered the game management category. Today, Moultrie is one of the best-selling brands of feeders and seeders in the world, and they continue to innovate with new technology that gamekeepers will rely on. Moultrie products are always field-tested and designed for hunters by hunters, combining forward-thinking innovation with time-tested practicality. Moultrie, first in feeders since 1979.
All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. So guys, I'm seeing that y'all have done some studies that have some really interesting data, and you've probably talked about this a bunch, but we wanted to be able to listen to you explain it and ask you some questions. And where's the best place to start here, Marcus?
I've been involved in several studies over really the past 17 or 18 years now. One of those studies just was recently published, and we had 10 years of data on white oaks. And I think it has some really interesting things that we can learn about, not just the importance of oaks and their character in terms of how they mast, but also some important implications for how we might manage mass production in oaks as well. And I have another study that's ongoing that's a follow-up to that, where we've expanded and hopefully for long term, it's planned to be a long-term experiment. We're in year 3 now, where we've added laurel oak and swamp chestnut oak and water oak to the mix, which are, we really don't have that much data on masting and wildlife use of those species relative to, white oak and variety of the red oak species.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that'll be cool. Adding some reds to the mix. For sure.
Yeah, and I know, and Will has some really interesting data that fits in with that as well from some of your recent research on management.
Yeah, in my lab, we haven't studied actual masting as much, but we've looked at some other things that you can do under those, masting species like oaks, so that those areas, and I'm sure this is something y'all want to get into eventually today, but you can make your hardwood stands a multi-purpose stand that can receive use by wildlife and support wildlife, including deer and turkeys year round, instead of just making it a fall and winter thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to learn more about that for sure. Dudley, this is your center of your wheelhouse. I'm gonna let you kind of take over the questions and go.
Yeah, and this is just off the top of my head. I hadn't really had a chance to prepare, but thankfully, this is my favorite subject on the planet, so I think I'm going to be okay. I remember, Harper. I would go to like a QDMA convention years ago, and I watched Dr. Harper present on this, and it just blew my mind. I just refused to believe it. That fertilizing an oak tree doesn't help it produce more. And but then I would sit there and read the article and trying to find holes in the literature and all of that. And I was like, certainly they're missing something. And then, really after several years, I just kind of gave up on it and accepted it after sitting there and thinking about it. And so I guess this isn't much of a question. It's kind of a theory that I've come up with, and maybe you guys can help me, but it seems like these white oaks that you guys have been studying and taking all these measurements on, you've stated that some of these trees, some of these individuals are very heavy producers. Mm-hmm. Some of those trees are not heavy producers, and then some of them hardly produce at all. So my theory with that is, like, if you were to take all of those heavy producers and like clone them or something and move them into another study area, and you were to fertilize those and have other areas that you did not fertilize, you probably would see a significant difference in the amount of acorns that they produce. Being that oaks are wild and they are extremely variable in how they produce acorns, I feel like that may have skewed the results a little bit. It's just like, pecans, you can fertilize those and they'll produce more. Corn, you can fertilize that and they'll produce more, but they are all crops that have been improved. But a lot of unimproved crops that have extremely variable production from individual to individual, I can totally see how that would skew the results like that, to where, if you're fertilizing a tree that's not going to make acorns anyway, that's going to just totally blow the results, to where when you look at it on a population level, it's not going to produce more. So I know that was an earful and it wasn't even really a question, but what are your thoughts on that? If you were to move all your better trees out into a new study area and fertilize those versus not fertilizing the others, what do y'all think would be the results?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that. I've been thinking about this for a long time, since I was a kid even, and I was lucky enough to be to help start that project with Dr. Harper years ago as part of my master's project, and we continued it on, and that was the 10-year data set. And I was pretty surprised with the results, but what we did in that study, we tracked individual oaks, all white oaks, for 5 years, and then used all of the masting data from individuals to classify them into 4 groups. And just like you said, I think 11% of them were excellent producers, and that means that they were producing more than double what the mean of the population was. So they're double, at least double. Some of them are far more than double the average production of an oak. And then we had 3 other groups, but the other really important one was the poor producers, which is almost half of the oaks. And a poor producer just means that they produce far less than the average tree. And some of them, like you said, I mean, even in the study, we couldn't even demonstrate they produced an acorn. So we used the first 5 years of data to separate all the oaks out, trying to get at what you're saying.
Okay.
Maybe there's something inherent to the genetics of the individual and that potential. And I kind of expected exactly what you said. If we fertilize the the good producers or the excellent ones, but particularly the good producers, I thought we're probably going to see a big bump, and a poor producer just is a poor producer, and we're not going to see much from that. But that's not what the data showed once we got done. And by the way, so what we did in that study was separated them into those groups, and we had 2 treatments that we implemented to half of them. So we had our control trees. We just continued in each of the classes, the production classes, we continued to monitor for an additional 5 years. And then we had a distribution of trees across those classes that we fertilized and limed according to soil test, and every year. And we also had oaks that we just did a canopy release, and basically all we did was kill any tree that was interacting with its canopy so that it could have room to expand. And we also had those 2 treatments combined, the thought being, if we give them enough room and sunlight, maybe then they can respond to fertilization. And overall we did not pick up any effect of the fertilization across the classes.
Wow.
But with the canopy release, there was a 65% increase in production of those individuals. And it also did not matter what class they were in. It was 65% on average across trees. So it honestly really challenged me, because that's not what I expected to happen.
Yeah, I'm just, and obviously when you release them, you're given more sunlight space, more root space.
Yeah.
That's just obvious. I mean, that would be like turning it into
makes perfect sense.
Turning it into a plantation of pecan trees is kind of the way I think of it. You're giving them all the room they need. But I'm just trying to think, what other plants out there that if you were to plant them agricultural style, fertilization would not help them produce more. I mean, I've tried to rack my brain for other, and you've probably looked that up to prove me wrong yet again. But
I've definitely tried to find it. So there's a couple of ideas floating around, and one of the next paths that we may take with it is that the timing might matter. The timing of fertilization and how it influences flowering. That could matter. Or it may be that even in these oaks were in a particularly poor area. So I thought that we'd see a magnified response, but they may still not be very limited in terms of nutrients that we're applying with fertilizer.
That makes sense.
So that's another. Yeah. So there's alternative. There's several alternative hypotheses that I think could be tested, but it didn't seem like the oaks were allocating the additional nutrients to acorn production in our study. So I think there's still room to go further with that and look at different things, but I honestly don't have a good answer for you why it didn't show the same thing that we would see in other species, because the study design, especially from a wildlife research standpoint, is really strong.
But I think the take home from this is, after reading this, who in their right mind would take the time and spend the money to go fertilize a bunch of oak trees in the woods when you can just go release them? But it still has, has me scratching my head.
So has anyone, I'm sure this has been done, so I'll ask it, has not anyone studied preference? Because I know it's totally anecdotal, but people that have done this before, they think it's producing more acres, but, without a controlled research, they don't know that for sure. But they swear by the fact that deer seem to prefer them. Now, that could just be anecdotal too, but I didn't know if is there like a dry matter analysis done on before and after type of deal?
That's a fantastic question. And because everybody on the author line of this paper is a hunter, we immediately were thinking about that, and we did test the acorns to see if they changed in quality or size, various different characteristics. And also we looked at basically wildlife in aggregate in terms of how, were they more likely to choose the acorns that were fertilized. And as I recall, we did see a small bump in a couple of nutrients in the acorns. I think protein and maybe phosphorus. It was statistically meaningful from a biological standpoint. I don't know that I would call it biologically meaningful, but when we looked at wildlife use, it didn't show any trend.
Right.
So we didn't see stronger preference.
Yeah, one of the things that I've wondered about that too, because I've, like you, Toxie, I've anecdotally seen that there's certain trees that when they mast, even if there's a bunch of others around doing the same thing, they're preferred. And I've always thought, just kind of with my hunter's brain, not my researcher's brain, that there are other things about where that tree is situated that makes that deer comfortable, or, you know, other species of wildlife comfortable with using that particular tree.
Well, then the other question I was having is that there's so much more complexity to what's going on with the soil than NP and K and fertilizer. And I realize fertilizers have various micronutrients, but could there, I mean, y'all, Dudley has forgotten more than I'll ever know about this, but are there not other micronutrients that are so critical to triggering, you know, whatever, more flowers or a bigger acorn or so forth too, that might be missing from some soils? It's hard to test. I mean, you'd almost have to do a soil test where every tree was to know that, and then know what you applied.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say when I was listening to y'all that occurred to me, because it is so complex, is that, you know, what might happen, it might take, 2 to 5 years, Dudley, for that tree to actually exhibit the health increase from that fertilizer, because trees are in a different cycle than corn, beans, clover, grasses, you know?
Yeah, very, very well could.
So it's complex, but I think the message I'm hearing is like trying to keep people from, like a lot of topics, they're kind of hunting lore, as Will alluded to, is like, don't fertilize your oak trees and expect magic automatically, because that's not been the proven case, you know.
Well, I think one thing it showed is releasing the canopy is a tremendous benefit to that oak and how well it can produce. And you're right, as far as it being long term, we were trying to address that, and it's one of the longest term oak studies, and the only one that I'm aware of that has included those two treatments. We were trying to do it long enough, so to speak, to account for, you know, year to year variation in oak masting, and the fact that it might take a long time for them to respond. I think that is definitely important. But the take home message, it definitely wasn't magic. But I have been around plenty of openings, or, you know, food plots or places that have an oak that just rain it down, and every deer in the woods wants to be under it. You know, I've gone through that as well as a hunter for a long time, and it definitely made me take a step back for a minute when I saw the data in aggregate. But I also was one of the students that was out there counting, you know, tens of thousands of acorns. So, you know, I guess I have a a unique perspective from that point of view. Is like, well, I've got to trust the data, you know, that it's pretty clear that canopy release it in that shorter 5-year term is having a huge impact on productivity, and we didn't see it in fertilization. But I think it is important for you to realize that that doesn't mean that there aren't contexts where that's important.
Right.
I don't think it proves that, but it does show me that some of the forest stand improvement things that we commonly talk about could be particularly important, especially if you're managing mast production.
And if you're thinning around your trees a little bit, you're probably going to be attracting more wildlife to that tree anyway by default, just because it's going to have more forbs and browse and things like that.
Yeah, stump sprouts, you know.
Yeah.
So while we're still here talking about the release, can one of y'all explain the preferred method for releasing? Is it hack and squirt, or is it a chainsaw, or what's the most effective way to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's going to be context dependent. And one of the things that I think, Bobby, that's really important to circle back to in this conversation is folks are oftentimes nervous about cutting any hardwoods, especially oaks, and rightfully so, because we talked about at the beginning of this conversation how important of a role that they play in providing forage for wildlife. But when we're armed with that knowledge of understanding that, you have potentially half of the trees within a given population that are contributing very little in terms of acorn production, if you know which trees those are, then that potentially frees you up to start thinking about, hey, I can take this tree and that tree and, benefit my better producers, and maybe, maybe even increase the amount of acorn production across that several acre stand compared to what it previously was. But, there's traditional commercial harvest. If there's a market for that, of course, the risk that you're going to run with commercial timber harvest in a hardwood stand is damage to trees that you want to leave behind. So if that's a major concern, or if there's not a market, or if you're working with a smaller acreage, a smaller hardwood stand, like a lot of landowners are, especially down here in the South, like in streamside management zones, those buffers along creeks and things like that. My preferred method was taught to me by Dr. Craig Harper, and that's to girdle and spray. I used to hack and squirt all the time, and he, I guess you could say, converted me. Because especially when you're killing big trees, yeah.
Y'all get a kick out of
you,
this. Dudley's nickname with me is Dr. Kevorkian. He is a hack and squirt master, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, when you're working with some of these bigger trees like we've killed in some of my research, that hack and squirt can turn into a lot of work.
Yeah.
So Craig convinced us to go, with a light saw with a relatively short bar on it. And, you have one guy running the saw and one person with the spray bottle, and you can loop around that tree pretty quickly. You're just cutting down into that living tissue, that cambium layer. And then the other guy's coming behind you, and you're spraying a little bit of that solution into the cut. And, anything that's about 4 inches in diameter or smaller, we just fell it right there, and then we spray the stump.
So some of these trees that y'all are thinning out are significantly bigger than I was thinking, apparently.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We've killed, I guess the biggest tree I can ever remember as far as one of these research projects was probably about a 30-inch poplar.
Mac, you look like you got a question.
Yeah, so one question that I have is, so you've been able to identify the excellent trees, but what were some common variables like site location, pH, soil type? Did you find any, paths cross with the variables with the excellent trees?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the initial things that we did with the white oak study, and at the time we had 3 years of data, and not just from the Tennessee site, we also had a North Carolina site. We were trying to figure out, is there something about the trees that predicts that they're going to be good, like what, like things you just said, what, their aspect or where they're at in the canopy, their bowl size, all kinds of things like that. And what we came out with was basically, if you put all of those things into a model that you can observe on the oak, it explained like 1 or 2% of the variation. So basically nothing. But what that basically told us is that it is driven by the individual's genetics. And I think that's particularly important. I know I've talked to Dudley about this a ton, with you picking specific individuals that you guys are even growing trees from.
That's exactly.
In your native nurseries, it does seem to be genetic is most important. And then if you give them room, all of them will perform better. But some individuals, 11% of the individuals in this study were producing almost half of the mast.
Very interesting.
So, and then even, we couldn't go to the individual level when we're summarizing data. But some individuals are producing a substantial amount of the mast, just that individual. In fact, I have a current student, Kelsey Domini, who's looking at those other oak species, and I believe it was, I can't remember which oak species. One of the oak species, it was a single-digit % of the acorn, or a single-digit % of the trees were producing almost 80% of the mast. So genetics seems to be the factor. Now, what we did find in that study is that you can take a few steps to identify which ones those are based on whether or not that you see acorns on the ground around them or in the canopy. And you guys know, you're stewards of the land and paying attention while you're out there. You probably have a pretty good handle already which individuals those are on your property. And if we basically did an analysis to try to figure out how could we identify it, and if you could show either by looking in the canopy with the set of binoculars or seeing holes around the ground or however you're doing it, if you could show that a particular individual produces 2 out of 3 years, it's most likely a good or excellent producer. So that's not that difficult to do, but it does seem that you have to look at the actual mast on it. That was the only thing that we could use to identify them.
That makes sense. I do have one more question on that. Would the age of the tree differ? Like, would it get worse the older it gets? Could that have played a factor into being an excellent or an average tree?
Yeah, Will, I know you were just digging in data on that.
Yeah,
you want to talk about it?
The answer is it depends. On from one species to another. So there's been a couple of pretty good papers out of southern Appalachia looking at this in northern red oak, white oak, black oak, chestnut oak, and scarlet oak. And like for white oak in particular, their data showed that acorn production increases right up until about 28 to 30 inches, and that's where it peaks. And the average was, I think, around 2,300, 2,400 acorns per tree. And then after that 28 to 30 inch diameter mark, most white oaks start to decline. So for example, like a 38 inch white oak in that study, they projected would drop down to about 1,400 acorns per tree. So not quite half of what it was at its prime. Now,
that's kind of like Bobby as he gets older.
Not as good as it once was.
So northern red oak is kind of the same way. It peaks at about 20 inches, and then it drops off, and its production was like a third of what it was at 20 inches once it hit like the mid 30s in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and just for clarity, we weren't at the extremes. All of our trees in the study on white oaks were they were all either co-dominant or dominant in the canopy. So they're probably talking about a 10 or 11 inch tree all the way up to maybe low 20s. So I don't think we were studying the range of age where we would start seeing that happen in that population.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of that prime age white oak, which is a pretty wide swath of size classes.
Nozzler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nozzler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nozzler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at Nozzler.com.
The Ferminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Ferminator does the rest. Check it out at theferminator.com.
It's clear that people should take away from this that likely the top thing you can do is just give your tree some room, some space.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that obviously is the competition, the pulling nutrients or moisture and, maybe shading out. But I'm just wondering, has anyone ever determined, like in a lot of plants, some plants compete. I mean, I plant stuff in my garden, some stuff with the slightest competition that really can't be affecting nutrients or water because I give it to them every day in the garden, just wilt from any competition. And I just wonder, how much is there something beyond what we physically study that affects, trees being encroached on by other trees, where some trees are kind of dominant, like you said, and they don't care, and some do. I just wonder if there's more to it than just, sunlight and nutrients and water and so forth from giving them space. I don't know. It just seems like plants are a little more mysterious.
I think this is just the tip of the iceberg on this. And there's a lot of stuff that is hard for humans to understand that is going on.
That's what I was getting at. And I don't know that. It just
seems
like it.
Like
the more you
study with the mineral stumps, that just kind of blew my mind. But it's almost like you're doing the same thing. You're releasing that tree by cutting it down, but then it sends up all these shoots, and it has this monstrous root system.
Yes,
it's going straight to these these small little stems that are coming out of the roots and making it more
nutrition.
There's just so many things. And then I've got a fellow oak nerd buddy, Ryan Russell.
Oh, he's the man.
He was telling me that there's folks saying that some of these trees that aren't good producers, these individuals, they actually may be the trees that are helping to pollinate some of these trees that produce heavily.
I was wondering if timber
it's just kind of like, when you're shooting, does hold a lot of the genetic information that helps a buck express its antler genetics. You can't just cull bucks to get good antlers. And so I think there's a lot of, I guess what I'm saying is I think there may be a lot of unknowns.
What are you saying, Dudley?
That Mother Nature.
Yeah.
I think you just said it.
Yeah.
And it's it's fascinating. And what that's saying is there's a lot more for you guys to study and come back to us on.
And y'all got to understand, you're talking to a guy who talks to us, plays, comfort rock music to his oak trees and talks to them.
I know that works.
It does work. He can grow them.
Yeah. Dudley, I thought you may have read a book called The Secret Life of Trees. Have you read that?
I hate to admit this, but and Bronson has really gotten on to me about this, but I don't like reading books. I hadn't read books since the internet came out.
Yeah.
And
well, this one's on Audible, so you can listen to it.
Okay, good.
But you should, because it's speaking to what you guys are talking about right now. And as someone who has studied oaks and various other plants for years and years now, it blew my mind at how much I didn't understand about what's actually going on. And one thing that you guys didn't mention, one of the really important things that we really don't understand very well, other than to know that it's important, is mycorrhizae in the soil and the association with different trees, and it's connecting them. They're sharing nutrients and information and all sorts of things through it.
Now we're
that
talking.
book kind of touches on that. And we really just don't have that figured out, and I certainly don't understand it. How that works, but I do understand enough to know that I really don't know how.
He just got one of my favorite sayings. As I get older, I used it this morning. I was like, as I get older, I realize. And people are talking about being smart or having wisdom or something like that. It's like the really smart people are the ones that know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lanny, he just reminded me of that.
Yeah. Just listening to all this, I'd just be interested to know. I mean, I'm assuming with both y'all being hunters and spending time in the woods, growing up your lives and everything else, what was some of the most surprising thing that came to light for you for these studies? Either something that you assume was true or assume was false.
I will say in this long-term study, I expected them to respond to the fertilization.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was going to happen, at least in the ones that we released, because I thought even if it is just helping the tree expand its canopy faster, we'll pick that up in the way that we're measuring it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very surprising to me. But when we're talking with the mycorrhizae, for instance, if that's connecting a ton of trees together, maybe you have to fertilize a bunch of them before they all start. I mean, there's so many things to learn about it. I don't have a good handle on why we didn't see a response, but I can think of several things to look into as a result of that.
That's good job security right there. More stuff to study.
Yeah. There were a couple things that really surprised me about this. And, one of them was, Dudley, like you, I can remember I was in the audience. I don't know if it was the same place that you were when you heard Dr. Harper share some of this information on fertilization and canopy, limiting canopy competition. But one of the stats that he threw out there was that a third of the white oaks in their study produced 75% of the acorns. And when I heard that, I was just floored, you know. The second thing I think that is right up there and maybe even more surprising to me than the first was that, you know, there are some species like white oaks that do tend to decline in production once they pass a certain size. Because just growing up hunting, I mean, especially like if you're out on a new tract of ground, I was always looking for the biggest trees.
100%.
You know,
the biggest whitey scalious bark.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And how many times, you know, did I sit over one of those trees and not see a single thing, you know? And now we have a little bit more information as to why. I mean, part of it's because I may not be that good of a hunter, but part of it may have been the oak's fault.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Bronson the other day about this and this very subject. And you know, at my farm growing up, I had this southern red oak, and it was right near a white oak. And a few years, both of them would be dropping at the same time. And by golly, the deer would go right to that nasty, high tannin southern red oak and just gorge themselves on those things. And they would just sit there and watch the white oaks drop right next to it. And, you know, I know that's anecdotal and just one instance, but that kind of leads me to think that there's something that we don't know how to measure yet, or that we've overlooked, that is why a deer would choose one acorn tree over another. Especially when you can put a southern red in your mouth and chew on it. And I mean, you want to go wash your mouth out, and the white oak, it's a little sour, but it's not that bad, you know?
Yeah.
So it just makes me want to ask more questions.
Yeah. Dudley, just to add to that, you guys remember Mariah Bogus, you helped. I think I talked about last fall on an episode with you guys about some of the research that you were instrumental in helping us accomplish. But one of the things that we did, and we haven't gotten it published yet, but we did the work, and I kind of have a good handle on what it's likely to show. We looked at 20 species, or maybe 18 or 20 species of oaks. We did diet selection trials, and southern red oak was commonly up near the top. So that may not, may not be far off base with your anecdote. The other thing that I think is an important point, and another thing that was really eye-opening to me about this subject, came to fruition in their current study. I've talked to people about diversity and why you'd want different oak species, and we've gone through that, but we have really clear evidence of that now, of why you wouldn't just want the one that everything likes the most.
Exactly.
And so when we were tracking the swamp chestnut oak and laurel oak and water oak, and there's a couple of other species, we just don't have that many individuals that we're tracking. It is clear, as clear as it can be, that deer preferred swamp chestnut oak over those other species.
The great
it's obvious. Yeah. It has shown that in various diet selection trials. But now that we're tracking them over multiple years, we had one year where swamp chestnut oaks just completely failed. We had no acorns produced from any tree.
Yeah.
And
like this year, just about. Yeah. They're scarce this year up here.
Yeah. And the study site where we're doing that work, they're scarce this year on that study site because it got hit by the hurricane.
Oh, gosh.
And all the mass fell out of the trees. So they all fell, but they fell in August instead of ripening. But so what that told me is it's a real clear reason why you would want to have a diversity of oak species, because they kind of prop each other up, right? We had this huge boom year, And then these bust years, especially when you only have one or two species, but they don't align with one another necessarily, and you kind of smooth that variability out where you can always have some mass produced if you have several species in the mix. And
For sure.
that was something that really kind of just illuminated for me when I was looking at this data. That's pretty important. I would have said swamp chestnut oak is what you want, but now I'm kind of reining that back a little bit because those other species produced really well, even though it failed completely.
For sure.
Well, one other aspect of that is I was thinking about it a minute ago when we were just on this whole subject of oaks and managing that. And in most places, best case scenario, you're looking at 4 months worth, maybe. I guess stuff left over and there's not a high density, maximum 6 months. And when you talked about diversity just then, there's two reasons that jumped in my head. One was what you talked about, because a certain species might not produce, and certainly don't want a monoculture of one type. But then there's that length of time. So we've got, a lot of people are down on sawtooths in this day and age, and true to form, they do pile out of, long before the Alabama season opens, but they do extend the season of whatever nutrition or availability. Like around here, I guess the great late thing for us is nuttall, especially in the low areas. There'll still be acorns hanging in trees on well into January and dropping the markers. I remember, we don't have them here, but down around Livingston, there's a lot of laurel oaks, and they're, I think, famous for being real late too. But so I'm just saying, from what you said, people should take stock in diversity also to extend the window of attractiveness, not only the benefit to your wildlife, but like having critters on your place. Because we've proven around here, I don't need the research to prove deer, especially mature deer, will migrate a long way to go to the best food source in the fall and winter. And so, you want that on your place.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. It's cool that, like, nuttall oak is, when people say, what's your latest dropping oak you carry? And nuttall oak is the clear winter, especially for the South.
Yeah.
And they drop like in December, January, and February.
Yeah.
But a lot of those other red oaks that may drop in October and November, a lot of them remain under the leaf litter for the fall and winter, just like, Mariah showed in his study. And so whether you have a late dropping oak or an oak that drops acorns in the fall that the deer and turkeys just don't eat until late winter, they're both important. I want both. I want the late droppers and the early droppers.
Absolutely.
I want the diversity.
Yeah. That's a great point, Dudley. And part of the point I wanted to make, but to take it a little bit further even than that and just kind of expand it out beyond thinking about oaks is, like when I teach my students in my habitat management class, I tell them, this plant or that plant maybe isn't as preferred by deer, isn't as preferred as a seed producer for birds like turkeys, but that doesn't mean that it's a low value wildlife plant. They all kind of interact and they feel their own role in the ecology. And we need those things that are lower preference earlier in the year so that when times get hard, later on into winter, thinking about like February, that there's still some forage available out there, whether it be through the form of red oaks or even, just like with soft mass, there's some soft mass species that are less preferred that you'll see birds starting to eat on once we get to that time of year.
Yeah.
That's good. Those are good points.
100%.
Mac, you had another question you wanted to ask?
So I know we're on hard mass. What would y'all's hypothesis be on soft mass on the fertilizer? Would you assume that it would have no effect on the production?
I would have to speculate on that. I don't know. But we have so much information from an agricultural sense. Like we clearly can affect soft mass and hard mass production in a bunch of agricultural species, including trees. My instinct is that it probably wouldn't have the effect that we usually see in that circumstance. But I wouldn't be surprised if you saw, like if you were fertilizing persimmon, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised to see a response, but I'm completely speculating on that.
Have you done anything, Dudley, with the stuff we planted soft massed that you could tell?
I mean, yeah, and it's obviously helps them grow faster, which I kind of want to mention that is that I have heard folks say I've seen people posting it on social media and stuff not to fertilize your oaks because of these studies.
Right.
Well, I mean, if you're doing some regeneration plantings and you're like in a field that maybe a little bit low in fertility, you give it some NP and K, it's going to grow faster than the one next to it that you don't fertilize.
Yes.
So if you want them to grow fast and produce at a younger age and grow to get a bigger canopy, absolutely you can get them further along by fertilizing them. These studies are just saying that if you fertilize trees, they're not going to produce more acorns, but you can definitely make them grow faster when they're in that vegetative juvenile stage to get them to maturity sooner than later.
Yes.
If you combine it with full sun. I wanted to clarify that because
I think that's a really important point. And, we have data from various aspects, but also a lot of timber companies fertilize their trees at those young stages to enhance survival and growth rate. So that, don't take from the studies that there's no reason to ever fertilize, but don't think it's going to be a magic bullet that's just going to instantly turn into a ton more mass that everything wants to eat.
But back to the soft mass thing, if you've got apples and pears out in the middle of a field in an orchard style, if you want to prune them and fertilize them, that's going to make them produce more fruits. But if you're in a more natural setting, like in the woods, and you've got black gums and black cherries and all that kind of stuff, I would think the first thing you would want to do is release them, just like you're doing with these acorn trees, and make them have a bigger canopy, make them have more root space, and you'll get a lot more production out of that than fertilizing, would be my guess on that.
Quick question on the fertilization. Was it granular fertilizer, or how was it applied, or just a couple notes about that?
Those were students after I graduated that did that, but I believe that it was granulated, and I know that they took a soil test and then fertilized NP and K and lime according to whatever the recommendations were for every individual.
And so they could see those nutrient levels increasing in the soil, but not the production in the trees. Interesting.
So have you got, with all these studies, and Will a minute ago was talking about how a tree, a certain size tree was producing, somebody counted all the acorns that it dropped. I think it was 2,400 or 3,800.
That's a tough job.
Is there a way to extrapolate and say that an acre of hardwoods could produce X amount of pounds of acorns per year? Y'all are not.
Marcus has done the math on that one.
Yes. Yes, there is. I posted it on Instagram at some point in the past, but if you're looking at a fully stocked stand, I think let's see, what were the numbers? A fully stocked oak stand.
Wasn't that about 100 stems per acre?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. 100 stems per acre. And we used the math that Mariah came up with when he was doing his study. If you guys remember, he used your equipment to collect like 75,000 acorns, and then he went out and simulated masting under individual trees, and he had to calculate how many acorns does that mean on average per tree for a decent year. And what that would work out to is about 300,000 acorns per acre. And 100, if you had 100 trees, fully stocked stand, using various sources of data, and that I believe was across various oak species that was just averaged. So 300,000 acorns, and he also started weighing acorns to figure out how many per pound there were, which I think we told Dudley about this, and he had some different measures for some of the other species, but we worked it out, and that was about 5,000 pounds per acre of acorns. 5,000 pounds per acre.
Tons.
That's a lot.
So
It really is.
Yeah, two questions is that a fully mature, I'm assuming that's a fully mature stand, 100 stems per acre.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, and maybe this is a School of Forestry question, but at 100 stems per acre hardwoods or oaks, what age would you generally consider it to become fully mature? I know that's got a lot of variables and soil types and riverbank versus hilltop, but what in general, at 100 stems, what would you call the age to first become, say, and I know it's an average, fully mature?
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends on a lot. The data that we pulled that from, I think they were 50 to 80-year-old stands or something like that.
I was going to say, by my whatever anecdotal learning as a timber owner, at least 50. I used to think it might be sooner, and I realized competition and soil type and all changed it. But
sure.
Yeah, I've seen coming back from a clear cut stuff that's 55 years, and it's nowhere near maturity because there's too many stems to start with. But still, I was just curious what y'all found. 50 to 80.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what the data that we pulled from was.
Right.
I'm sure that you could ask a variety of foresters and they may disagree or caveat that, but that's where we got the data to calculate that.
Go, Mac.
Thank you.
So this is my last phone a friend, I promise. So we're really focusing on quantity more so than quality. Is there more? I just think of the inputs, and I think of like a tree produces 3,000 acorns a year, but if it produced 1,000, would those 1,000 be higher quality than the 3,000? Does that affect? Is there any quantity over quality or quality over quantity?
We don't got anything for that one.
I don't know.
I think you stumped him, man.
Hey,
the closest.
Wait. He's from Auburn, but he's a smart guy because I just said you got to know what you don't know, and he said I don't know. That's a smart.
I love how you caveated that by me being from Auburn, but he's a smart guy.
Look good.
Well, I have to because of Bobby. If Bobby wasn't here, I'd give you a pass.
Oh, no.
The closest thing data point that I'm aware of that touches on that is that we have looked at the green weight of acorns produced, so not just looking at the total quantity, but actually the amount of sound acorns, and that green weight and the amount of sound acorns that a deer would actually eat, for example, tends to be much higher for northern red oak and white oak than several other species that have been looked at. But as far as within a species, for a tree that produces 1,000 versus 3,000, I'm not sure.
I think that is a really great question, and we have the opportunity on our ongoing work to actually test that, and I'm probably going to do that now, so I appreciate that.
Good job.
There you go,
but
Matt.
Yeah.
Blow the horns for
I
Matt
don't know.
over
I don't know if there's some sort of trade-off between the quality of the acorns and the number that they're producing. However, there is a bunch of data on various plant species showing that there are trade-offs in the investment in the number of seeds and other characteristics about the seeds that could matter a lot. I can't think of something right off the top of my head that is a single species, but there is a trade-off, at least across a bunch of plant species in a genus, for how much they invest in seed number versus size. So I would not be surprised if some of them that may not produce as many might have a higher quality or a larger acorn or something like that, even within the oak species. That wouldn't surprise me that much based on those other lines of evidence, but I think that's a really good question.
Well, there's been research, and I'm sure you guys could look it up. I found it on Google 20 years ago. Dudley looked at it, but it was nutritional analysis by species. And it indicated that it was commonality across the species. So I would tell me, regardless of how many produced, it showed, and this I believe the highest protein content, I think it weighing in at a whopping like 9% or something, was a Durand. And if you're familiar with the prairie, the Durand white oak, we have actually have a lot of them here. But the one thing consistently at the top in fat content was the Quercus machiae,
swamp chestnuts.
Yep.
Huh.
So
I would say if there was a Durand in that study, then the study was probably done at Mississippi State, if I had to guess.
Could have been, but it was.
I have a bunch of those on my place.
I love it. It's a beautiful acorn. But
wasn't the Durand one of the most wildlife beneficial though because of the size?
But I mean, it was a great size. I was just looking at fat, fiber, protein, so
carbs,
forth.
fat, yeah.
And it was the but there wasn't a wide range. It was like 7 to tops was like 8.8 or something like that.
Yeah.
But clearly the big thing that stuck out, which means why they're so preferred, they taste so good, was the fat content in the.
And you could see the differences in the carbs versus fats too. That was pretty wide, if I remember.
It's out there, but it was being done a long time ago because I looked it up probably 20 years ago, Dudley, and I looked at it, and I've looked at it and Googled it again and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're censoring it.
No, it's out there.
I've seen
it's out there.
I've seen some of that kind of data, and Will and I just were having this conversation recently. A lot of the work that we reference when we go back, in fact, the age classes that you referenced, what is that, from the 50s or 60s? Will?
The 40s.
Or maybe
1944.
40s. A lot of the work that we look back to on this kind of stuff was done decades and decades ago. So I definitely have gotten a renewed interest in it, and I think that's shared across quite a few researchers. But yeah, that's a good point. The oaks can vary across species, but whether or not they do within species based on their relative investment and production, I don't know.
And the other thing that I was going to mention earlier, when Marcus was talking about all the work that he's got going on right now down in Florida, is that a lot of the studies that we're pulling from to make decisions about hardwood management are also kind of from further up north in the Mid-South. There's not been a whole lot of it done in, coastal plain ecosystems and, our oak communities that we commonly have here. So that's an important gap as well.
Yeah, that'll be a good
I think
addition.
that's one of the reasons that the recent study you guys published, Will, was really important.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that much information in some of these more southern systems.
So, Will, do you have a favorite oak tree? Would it be a white oak?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a white oak.
Well, around where you're living now, a lot of times in these big fields, you'll see these big giant water oaks.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up around Montgomery, I remember bow hunting around a lot of them, and they're just hard to beat them.
Yeah, early they're great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I've killed a lot of deer sitting over water oak.
Yep, me too. I have. They love them.
Yeah.
I just nowadays I generally lump all of those together as a small acorn red.
That's right.
Cherry bark, willow oak, water oak, shingle. I just feel like they're so important to wildlife, and we overlook all of that. And in Mariah Bogus's deal, his study, that just kind of turned me on to that. We always just thought white oaks were king, and that's what we wanted to plant all over our place, but it just goes back to diversity. Last year, I'd be walking around in the big woods in February looking for turkey sign, and where did I find all the turkey sign? It was where all the little small acorn reds had dropped acorns that the deer and stuff missed during the fall.
Well, they last longer too, especially if they're not underwater.
Yep.
Those small reds, I guess there's more tannin. Is that a preservative kind of, Dudley?
I think so.
Yeah, they just seem to last so much longer.
Yeah, Marcus and I just talked about this the other day too.
It's hard to beat a good white oak that's dropping during early bow season. Though.
We don't talk about the unsung hero is the willow oak too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In our ongoing study, we're tracking acorn production by week on every individual.
That's great.
It's
That's
pretty intense. Pretty intensive. I think I may have talked about this with you guys before, but we have more data now. One thing that's been pretty remarkable, we have the best data on water oak, but this seems to hold true with other species as well. There's quite a bit of individual variation in when they produce as well. I did talk about it because I remember Toxie calling out the oak species before I even said it last time. But water oak, we have some that are peaking, like individuals in the same population, their peak production is early October, and we have other individuals that their peak production is in December, and they're everywhere in between that. And that's a Southern Georgia study site, and that's something else that's been pretty remarkable. We haven't published that yet because we want to get more data on it, but the individual variation is substantial.
We see that a lot and of course they're not natural here, but live oaks, they're planted all over the landscape around here. And we see a lot of variation with that. In fact, we've got a few parent trees we collect from, and they'll have green acorns on it at the same time that they've got mature black acorns that are dropping. It's like
that's really cool.
It's like an indeterminate tomato. They'll be dropping, some of them in October, and then it'll have green ones that are even a little bit smaller that don't mature until December. But yeah, like you said, some of those water oaks are incredibly variable from tree to tree.
Well, Dudley's been walking. I mean, there's probably a few people in America that have walked and picked up acorns under more different trees than Dudley, but there's not many. And he's been doing it for quite some time, helping select and fine tune what we're offering here at the nursery. And when you say that by your findings, I know it's kind of anecdotal, not hard research, that certain trees that have an odd drop date, like a shumar that drops in September or something like that, or we've got the late drop live thing that has green acorns all the way into late January here. Do you see that continues year over year? So it's more of a genetic trait?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why.
I mean, it's not something that varies from year to year.
That's what I was asking.
Consistent. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what our data are showing as well. That some individuals are just predisposed to be at a different time than others. But another thing that has been surprising is we are seeing it on kind of a sliding scale, we think, where the whole population, the timing is kind of fluctuating a few weeks even in terms of when the overall peak in the population is from year to year. So that's been surprising. But again, we've only had 3 years on that, so I'm not real confident in that yet. But it did vary more than I expected, although they kind of stay organized in that variability, if it makes sense, where some individuals are always going to be the earliest ones in the population, but exactly what timing that is, it varies, at least in that study area.
Another thing I love about the oaks is there's just so much more to learn,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And one thing I was going to mention, to circle back to the point Toxie made earlier, is, red oaks are available to wildlife generally later on into the late winter and early spring. And part of the reason for that is that white oak, species of the white oak group, not just the white oak, but the species in that group, when they hit the ground, they germinate relatively quickly after they hit the ground that fall. Whereas red oaks wait longer, and they're not going to germinate until into spring. And I'd always assumed that was probably part of the adaptation of red oak acorns having higher tannins, was to help them prevent being consumed before they had time to germinate and reproduce. And so Marcus and I were talking about this the other day, and he informed me, I learned something new, that really one of the main roles of that high tannin content in red oak acorns is to prevent insect damage before the acorns drop. So, maybe having that higher tannin content helps prolong their availability since they don't germinate to spring, but it apparently plays a role in their insect damage prevention as well.
I mean, that's a lot of plants make themselves taste worse, in areas to not be boogered up by insects.
Mother Nature's amazing.
Yep. So, absolutely.
What should we be asking you guys? What is there any more interesting facts that you guys were planning on discussing that we haven't asked a question about?
I was going to set you up, Will. you did talk about the other benefits that are coming from releasing oaks, and
yes.
I think, Will, that you should talk about your data, because they weren't looking at production necessarily, but those other effects, and I think that's pretty important.
Yes.
To add in here that you're getting other things from that canopy release.
Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of this was from Mark Turner's master's research a couple of years ago, and he's working on his PhD now up at University of Tennessee with Dr. Harper. But, Craig had done a lot of that work, reducing the canopy in hardwood systems and starting to introduce fire and looking at responses. But a lot of that previously had been done in the Mid-South with more of your traditional upland oak species. And, people were more readily accepting of the fact that they introduced, fire into that system. Well, we're down here in Auburn. We're right on the fall line. So, the coastal plain is right here to our south. And we wanted to see, could that be done here? And the main concern was that we have a lot more, thin-skinned or thin-barked, if you will, oak species in a lot of our hardwood forests, namely water oak. And the concern was that we were going to result in a lot of damage if we introduced fire. So we went in to these stands. It was actually in Barber County, Alabama, and we reduced the canopy closure in these mature hardwood stands by about 30%. So we took them from like 5% sunlight up to 35-40% sunlight hitting the ground. So not a wide open like savanna, but we transitioned it into a woodland, and we did that with the technique that I talked about earlier, which is girdle and spray. And we really didn't even need to remove that many oaks to achieve that. Now, we could have identified our poor producers and removed those and not lost much, but we were able to get pretty close to where we wanted by just removing things like, sweet gums and poplars and maples and relatively low value wildlife trees. And so after we did that, we introduced fire into the system. And, so we're at a point now where, given everything that we've talked about today, not only have we probably retained most of our acorn production in those hardwood stands, which is what hunters typically value them for, we may have even enhanced that by releasing those canopies from competition. And then on top of that, we increased deer forage biomass from about 25 pounds an acre to about 125 pounds an acre. And of course, depending on how you implement your prescribed fire in that stand and that follow-up management, you could also manage those areas for brooding and nesting cover for turkeys on top of that. So now you've got an area that can be used for turkey reproduction in the summertime, and you've got, acorns dropping in the fall, and you've got deer even foraging in there, and maybe even dropping fawns in these areas that have more understory vegetation in the summer as well. So to me, it's kind of a win-win, I guess, win. And we also found, if you run your fire through there properly, and we can go into more detail on that if y'all want to, or we may not have time, but if you maintain a relatively low intensity flame, we got very little actual cambium damage to any of those water oaks in there.
I mean, my takeaway from you guys and listen to everybody is like, go spend some time on your place. Don't just rush out there and do anything, and get a feel for trees that are these winners. They might not be 20 or 30% of your trees. They're real winners, and you can't do that in even one season probably.
No.
But, mark them, flag them, and then, spend a couple of years doing that. And whatever you do, even if you're going to clear cut your place for money and whatever, don't let anybody touch those stud muffins. They're so valuable. Would you say, Marcus? Will, that's one of the things to take away. If you can identify that, because you could even say, someone could argue with me and say, well, they're going to quit producing at a certain age anyway, but you're leaving all those offspring from it genetically in your stand too. So,
right.
I would be sure. And what I'm going to do is try to spend more time and mark those. I've spent enough time historically to know where some of them are, and be sure. And then, if Dr. Kevorkian, if I hire him to go in there and take care of some of the unwanted stuff, then he'll know for sure what to not mess with,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we found that typically you keep an eye on them for about 3 years and you get a pretty good sense of what they're going to do.
I actually did that on a timber harvest on our property in Alabama, where we retained only about 10% of the trees or so. And man, they rained them down. It was all, I've been hunting there my whole life. I knew every tree inside and out, and exactly what you're saying. Just, take some time to learn about what's going on your land while you're out there. It's not just about being out there. Take notes too.
So, guys, I want to ask, or just make sure that anybody listening that we clarify this. But when you talk about girdling or hacking and squirting, do you have to worry about? So, if you girdle and squirt a sweet gum, do you have to worry about that chemistry getting down into the roots, and then an oak tree over here next to it taking that up and it accidentally killing that tree?
So that is another major barrier to managing hardwood systems the way that we did in that study. So we tracked all the adjacent trees that we retained next to the treated trees. And we were actually looking at two different herbicide formulations, one of which was kind of a more traditional 50-50 Garlon and water solution. And the other one actually had a little bit of Arsenal AC in it. And the reason we added that Arsenal AC is that we wanted to expand our spectrum of control beyond what just the Garlon would get. And the Garlon in particular isn't very effective at any trees in the hickory genus. So I won't go into all the findings about those two different solutions unless y'all want to, but my point is the solution that did have Arsenal AC in it should have had a greater root transfer potential than the one that was just Garlon and water. And the only incidental kill that we found of all the trees that we treated, and we tracked hundreds of them, was of one sweet gum stem that we believe was suckered off of one of the trees that we intentionally treated. So we didn't cry about that one.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah, but I think I've heard of a guy that accidentally.
I know a guy. Yeah. Just follow the labels is all I got to say.
Yes.
Because let me tell you,
Read and follow the labels.
it'll get them.
It was a big oak tree
It's
too.
a big
wasn't
oak tree, and it was Arsenal.
Yeah, and that's the thing is don't be, especially if you're walking around in hardwoods with a solution that contains any Arsenal, you don't have room to be sloppy.
No.
Yeah, I was a little sloppy, I think.
Yeah.
And then it rained right after.
On the ground.
It was bad.
Oh my goodness, Dudley, why don't you ask him your trivia question?
Okay.
And before we do that, Mac or Richie, one of y'all, guys? We've got a trivia question. Mac, who are we playing for?
All right, so the good docs are playing for Alston Hannah, and the prize is a brand spanking new Gamekeeper mesh back cap.
Yeah.
What?
Hey, look, we've got them in the store
at
now.
there.
The old school mesh back bottomland Gamekeeper hat. We've got that. We got those in stock now, so guys can go to the Gamekeeper, and there's a thing that says shop. You can click on it and you can see it. But so if you guys get this question right,
Alston Hannah.
Yeah, we'll win the prize. So
Well, we should send them caps too, please.
Oh yeah, we'll give them caps.
But you gotta get it right.
Okay, so I was thinking about doing a best 2 out of 3.
Ooh,
but
go for it.
So that must be because he came up with some hard ones.
Right, exactly. So
I'm
these are the
gonna
kind of questions that you probably haven't needed to know the answer to since you took dendrology or something like that. But
Oh
it is fun to try to stump y'all. So anyway, I hope your feelings aren't too hurt if you do miss something. So anyway,
I told Marcus going into today that Dudley's probably going to stump us on some aspect of the hoax.
Well,
but-
you've already gotten us a few times since we've been on the air. I'll just remind you of that.
Okay.
Dudley. And also, I don't think I've actually gotten one of these correct yet.
Okay.
I'm terrible with trivia.
Yeah, you're consistent.
All right. Okay. So first question. What do you call the root that grows out of an acorn or other seeds? Like as soon as it pops out, what is the scientific term that is not like a young root? What do you call that?
Is
Do
it
you know,
not?
Will?
I'm sorry, Austin.
Radical?
Correct.
Hey.
Oh, he got
All
one.
right, yeah.
Maybe I should have kept that one. Okay. All right. And then also, what is the male flower called? And it's other trees, but what is it also called on an oak? What is a male flower that hangs down from the branch and sheds pollen? What do you call that?
Will?
I think I know, but I know you know. So
Well, I know.
Why
'cause
don't,
I had
why don't
to-
you help Austin out?
Will, you go ahead.
It's called a catkin.
That's what I was going with.
Okay.
And you'll never know the
Me too.
difference.
I believe you on that. I do believe you.
I knew it, but I wanted Will to answer.
And I'm going to be honest. I had to double check this one. So, but I used to
the
know
mail
this
file
one.
or the next question.
This next question.
Yeah, if he had to double check, it's going to be a rough one.
And this also applies to other seeds and nuts and things. What do you call the outer shell or covering of an acorn? And I'm not talking about the cup or cupule or however you pronounce it. What is the actual shell of the acorn called?
They already got two.
You should have retained this.
Wait a minute. Time out.
From freshman year dendrology. I mean, come on.
Dudley, they've won 2 out of 3 already, so they're playing with house money now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the outer. I have a guess, but I don't think it's correct.
Okay.
You got a guess, Will?
No, I was gonna have one, but I think I was scared they'd hear my keyboard typing.
Have you had time to Google it?
It's kind of loud.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have a good answer. I think husk.
The
I'd have to
answer
go
is
with husk.
The answer is pericarp.
Oh man.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
I thought that's
I
what
would've
we
gotten
use
it
for
if you said
catfish
a
bait.
soft
But I'm gonna go with 2 out of 3. I think Will had that
100%.
word catkin in his mind, and he just didn't want.
Pericarp is a word I've heard before.
So
Yeah, I've used it in quite a few papers actually, but
Right.
it's always for soft mast.
so anyway, that's it.
Well, we've enjoyed having you guys on.
100%.
We thank a lot of y'all. Y'all have got a great podcast going down
They
there.
do.
What is it called? Turkey Science.
Yeah,
Oh,
wild turkey science.
Yeah, and y'all are doing a great job, and all this research that you guys are doing is just fantastic.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. Yeah, we were going to call the podcast Turkey Science. It, rolls off the tongue a little bit easier, but we didn't want people to think it was about the country, so we had to throw the wild in front of there. We're starting to look at those analytics.
We actually do get quite a few downloads in Turkey, the country. So we're thinking they're thinking it's a different kind of wild turkey.
So y'all are on the charts in Turkey, huh?
We showed up in Mexico, didn't we?
I bet they're really disappointed when they download that.
What is this?
It's not the wild side of Turkey they were looking for.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
we really appreciate it, guys. It's always a blast talking to you.
Sure. Appreciate y'all being here. Love talking
Absolutely.
about this subject, especially.
Yeah.
Very near and dear to us.
Well, it's October.
It's October. And I will say we have a fine crop of seedlings over there.
We
at Native
really do.
Nurseries right now.
Yep.
Each one of them has been hand selected. So
Except next year, I don't think the swamp chestnuts are going to be hand selected. I may have to rely on a listener that knows where some swamp chestnuts are dropping.
But we do have a lot of swamp chestnut seedlings this year.
Oh, we got a ton.
So, yeah.
To your
Get 'em in
point,
the ground.
Marcus, I have a spot that I cleared 22 years ago and made a food plot, maybe 1.5 acres, and it's got everything, great soil, water close by, roots, and then released them. And there's 3 swamp chestnuts, 21 consecutive years. They rained like just, so they've got it all.
Yeah,
and,
they do.
I released them. They're getting fertilizer. If that helps or not, it certainly isn't hurting. And to this year, I went and not a single acre. First time in 21 years. That's how bad it is.
Wow.
Dang.
Yeah.
Not a single acre. And I don't know, Dudley, was it a late freeze or was it with the debacle we had back in December?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of both.
But it's the worst, and I hadn't been out a lot, but I look a lot. It's the worst white oak year in my entire life for me right now.
Yeah, we got a few post oaks, a few chinkapins. That's about it around here. A few whites.
Well, guys, we appreciate y'all being around. Marcus,
sure.
you're going to be on the Outdoor Channel tonight at 8 o'clock East Central Time.
Yeah.
Talking about turkeys. I wish you would get that Friendly app so you can watch the show.
Yeah, I have been. I don't get to watch them when they air, but my in-laws record all of them. So when I visit with them, we watch them together.
Yeah.
So I do see them. I don't see it in real time usually.
Just to make Marcus homesick, when I get up from this table, I am headed to pick up my wife, and I'm headed to Sumter County.
There you go.
Wow.
Oh man.
And
Yep.
look,
I wish I was with you.
God's country.
hey, Will,
Oh yeah.
we would like to get you on a television show. This, so keep us in mind for any projects. The coyote eating the turtle eggs was a great one, but it hadn't worked out just yet. But
Yeah,
keep us
yeah.
in mind on some other stuff.
Yeah, we've got some cool stuff coming up that I think you guys are going to be interested in.
Awesome.
I think we need to send someone to film on turkey hunting together, because I bet that's like the Keystone Cops. Who's calling for who and who's got the gun?
Yeah. We actually went to this year together, and neither. Well, I guess both of us had the gun, and we had somebody else calling. For
Yeah.
the most part, although Will did tickle the subsequent gobbler that we took home.
Yeah, I had to do
fancy.
a little sweet talking there at the end.
I want to go with
And
Will to
unfortunately-
Texas.
Oh, really?
He sent some pictures of some Texas birds last year that were gorgeous.
Yeah.
Was that
yeah.
way south Texas, Will?
It was. That was. It was down there. I won't say the county.
Nope.
Oh, good.
Hey, that's a
Good
smart
for
man.
you.
That's a
I'm proud of
turkey
you.
hunter
There's
right
a true
there.
turkey hunter right there.
I'm
Yes.
learning. But
Yeah.
it was way down there.
He pretends to be this great, professor, biologist, but he's a true turkey hunter when you won't divulge the location.
It's
There you
over
go.
there.
There you go.
That's
That was a
right.
test.
But yeah, Marcus and I have a couple planned potentially for this spring. I think we're
That's awesome.
certainly going to hit up Oklahoma, and we may be hitting up Nebraska as well. But we'll see.
Yeah.
That's a different world.
Hopefully
out
Rio
there.
and a Miriam. That'd be great.
Don't go to Nebraska looking for a tree, is all I can tell you. It is like the moon,
Yeah.
but they're there.
All right, guys.
Absolutely.
We'll let y'all go. We sure appreciate y'all making yourselves available. This has been a good one. It's very interesting. If a guy was paying attention, he could learn something through all this for sure.
I did. I
I did
learned.
too.
I did too.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, Will, Dr.
Appreciate
Will
it,
Gulsby, you're on Instagram. Guys can follow you. What is your title handle there on Instagram?
It's at Dr. Will Gulsby and Doctor's abbreviated DR.
And then Dr. Marcus Lashley over here.
Dr. Disturbance. And
Yeah.
remember, he got that in high school going to the Brass Monkey in Livingston. He was a bouncer breaking up fights. They call him Dr. Disturbance.
Yeah.
There he is. Well, I bet everybody's already following them, but y'all have been really, you've been a lot of fun giving us some good information. We appreciate y'all being with us. Thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, guys.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yes,
Thank
thanks,
y'all.
guys.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for what you're
times.
doing.
Yeah. Lanny, what
ya.
did you learn?
Oh, just all kind of stuff. It's just interesting to think. I'm a lot like them. I was like, there's no way fertilization can help these plants, but it just seems like a different practice. Like releasing them, obviously,
Yes.
is the best route for it. And not only that, we're continuing to learn about the benefits of sunlight hitting the ground for our beloved turkey species and everything else. So I'm with Dudley. I'm ready to get out and start girdling some trees instead of, pushing fertilizer in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, you do both. But
Yeah.
I've heard too many smart people, a lot smarter than me, say the same thing as Marcus did today. And so you got to.
Well, and
There's
these
gotta
timber
be
stands
something to
too.
it, yep.
You the big oak tree is always surrounded by the little ones. I mean, you usually climb up in one of your climbers, but I mean, we probably need to be girdling and
Well, Marcus
spraying them.
alluded to greater research down the road. Dudley and I look at each other. It's like there's so much more going on.
Then we're even measuring.
Yeah, than we really know with
That's
trees.
what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
More
When it-
studies.
And he talked about the mycorrhizomes. I didn't read. So trees, it's like Avatar type stuff.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
so much going on
Just like it.
beneath the leaves that
Yeah.
we don't know about.
Right.
I would just encourage people to start planting trees, and it's just so addictive. I think it's good for your health and blood pressure
Of
and
course it
anxiety
is,
and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
It's a hobby, just like golf, tennis, bow hunting, or whatever.
Indeed.
Planting and tending to trees, it's so much fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, and time. I mean, everybody's it takes a long time. Time goes fast. I mean, the ones that we've planted.
Hey, I don't live life with many regrets, and one of my few is I didn't plant more trees when I was younger. Don't wait, because
Don't
then
wait.
you'll get to enjoy them. It doesn't take long.
It really doesn't take that long.
Yeah, it's so rewarding to watch what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Lanny, do you pronounce it acorn or acorn?
I say acorn.
Acorn.
Yeah. What
He's
about
kind
you,
of in
Mike?
between.
I think I say acorn.
Yeah.
I think I say both, depending on who I'm around.
Yeah.
Acorn.
I noticed those guys said mast a lot. They didn't say acre much.
And mast is just fruit from a tree, right?
That's a collective
that's
term,
everything
for all of it.
peaches and pecans.
So I just remembered looking at Mac. It reminded me. I figured out what Mac's superpower is this week.
Which one? He's got a bunch of them.
Every week he walks into my office and says, "I just picked up 1,000 acres. Got the hunting rights from 1,000." Somebody calls and he's selling them seed, and next thing you know, he's got the hunting rights.
For the same reason he's great at selling, he just wears them down.
Unbelievable.
Just take it. Just
Bobby,
take my land.
That's right. Bobby has a history of attracting these people that you can't say no to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How many acres do you now have access to?
Oh, not enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Hey, you can never have too many. That's one thing Bob.
No,
that's right.
That's right.
No, he's good at it. Congratulations. So.
Bobby's envious.
Yeah, I am. I sure am.
Bobby has acre envy.
Acre envy.
I know this won't air till November, right?
Probably next
but
week. Yeah.
It is October, so one more selfless plug.
That could
for
be
the
a
nursery.
T-shirt.
Yeah, it could. We're having an October promotion next year.
Promotion.
Promotion.
Richie.
But seriously, we got a fine crop out there. So and it's it's time to plant in the South. We got a great crop, for the North too. So just go check out nativenurseries.com.
They do. I'm telling you, I'm so proud. They do the best job and have the best trees.
There's no doubt.
They do.
Absolutely no doubt.
Yep.
I agree with you 100%.
Unsung
Richie,
heroes.
You got anything to add, Richie?
Richie.
Yeah.
Go Cavs.
Y'all check out the camo tractor. Y'all watch the television
Yeah,
show on
watch
Tuesday
It's in
nights.
the warehouse. I just saw it.
Yeah,
And,
It's a stud muffin.
It's beautiful.
We're gonna plant some with it here this week,
It
even
is
though it's not no rain on the forecast.
Richie,
We're still
we
gonna plant.
cannot dent that tractor.
No.
Do not, Richie.
No.
Do not take this to your house.
I got dibs
you
on
do
this
not have
weekend.
dibs on
Yeah,
this
I got
weekend.
dibs on this
No, you don't.
No,
You
Richie.
don't. You
No.
don't.
No.
All right, guys. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.